This is a very old story from a time when an elderly man and woman lived in a small hut deep in the dense forests. They had 12 sons who knew every corner of the forest. They also had 3 beautiful daughters, each unparalleled in their beauty. One night, while the mother and elder daughters were busy preparing dinner in the hut, the youngest daughter, Spruce, was outside, enjoying the glow of fireflies and the gentle night breeze in the moonlight. She stood barefoot on the soft grass. Suddenly, a rustling whisper reached her ears. From amidst the grass, a long, shimmering green snake emerged. Its eyes shone with an eerie brightness, and in a soft yet strange tone it spoke. "Spruce, my dear, promise to marry me, and I will leave this place at once." Spruce was startled. Steadying herself, she glared at the snake and said, "Go back to where you came from." But the snake, with the same calm persistence, replied, "Promise to marry me, and I will move out of your way." Spruce didn't know what to do. In her nervousness, words slipped from her lips without thinking. "All right, I promise." As soon as Spruce said this, the snake slithered aside to clear her path and then silently disappeared into the grass. Not even 3 days had passed when a great swarm of grass snakes came slithering toward the hut. It was as if they had gathered at some unseen signal. The snakes entered from every possible path, their invasion leaving the old man and woman stunned with fear. After a moment, the snake spoke in a solemn tone. "We have come with a marriage proposal. We have come to take Spruce." Hearing this, the parents flared up with anger and immediately refused. But when they learned that Spruce herself had made the promise, they grew anxious, for countless snakes were staring at them with their glowing eyes. They realized that whether they liked it or not, their youngest and most beautiful daughter would have to marry a snake. There was no other way. But then a clever idea struck the old parents. They devised a plan and told the snakes, "Give us time to prepare. We will gladly send our daughter with you." Hearing this, the snakes fell silent and waited. Meanwhile, the parents dressed up a beautiful white duck as a bride. They adorned its neck with jewelry, draped a golden shawl over its feathers, and veiled it before handing it over to the snakes. The snake procession left with the duck, but just then, a cuckoo perched on a tree branch called out loudly, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, you have been deceived. This is no maiden. You have taken a duck." As soon as the snakes heard this, chaos erupted among them. They immediately turned back toward the hut, their eyes blazing with fury. In an enraged voice, they demanded, "We have been tricked. We want the truth. Give us the real bride." This time, the parents dressed a beautiful white lamb as the bride, covering it with a bridal veil before handing it over to the snakes. Once again, the snake procession departed, but just as before, the cuckoo sang from the treetop, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, you have been deceived. This is no maiden. You have taken a lamb." Hearing this, the snakes furiously turned back toward the hut once more. At this time, their rage was uncontrollable. "We have been deceived again. We demand the truth. Hand over the real bride." Spruce's fate had been sealed. Her old parents had no choice left. If they refused again, the snakes would unleash their wrath upon them. With tear-filled eyes and heavy hearts, they reluctantly prepared their dearest daughter for marriage. Her siblings sobbed helplessly, but nothing could be done now. Spruce was finally sent away with the grass snakes. They traveled through forests, mountains, and valleys until they reached the seashore, where a tall and majestic snake awaited them. And then, in the blink of an eye, the snake transformed into a breathtakingly handsome young man. Smiling, he said, "Spruce, I am the one you made a promise to. I am not an ordinary snake, but the prince of the blue ocean." Spruce was stunned. She could not tell whether this was a dream or reality. When the prince took her hand, she followed him in silence. They descended into the depths of the sea, where a magnificent, gleaming palace stood. There, a grand wedding was held with great celebration. That night, Spruce tasted foods more exquisite than she had ever imagined and danced in the prince's arms. She was mesmerized by the palace's splendor. The prince cherished her deeply, ensuring she lived in endless joy and comfort. Time passed, days turned into months and months into years. Spruce became so happy and content in her new life that she gradually forgot her old home, her parents, and her siblings. She no longer felt sorrow, nor did she feel the absence of anything. Her life now flowed like a dream, deep within the blue depths of the ocean. One day, amidst Spruce's happiness, a moment arrived when she suddenly remembered her parents and siblings. A deep restlessness awakened in her heart, and she felt a strong desire to know whether they were still alive or not. She remained silent for several days, but finally she shared her feelings with her husband. At first, the grass snake refused to listen, but when Spruce pleaded repeatedly, he fell into deep thought and eventually said, "You may go, but first you must make silk for me from this golden thread." Saying this, he handed her a shining soft silk thread and showed her the spinning wheel, putting her to work. Spruce immediately got to work. She spun the wheel day and night, but to her astonishment, no matter how much she spun, the silk never seemed to decrease. That's when she realized that this was no ordinary silk, but something magical, and that her husband had devised this trick to stop her from leaving. Feeling hopeless, she went to an old witch who lived nearby and pleaded, "Mother, please tell me how to spin this silk thread." The old woman smiled and said, "Light the stove and throw it into the fire, there is no other way." Spruce returned and, pretending that she was baking bread, threw the bundle of silk into the flames. At once the fire flared up, and from within it, a large ugly frog-like creature started leaping about, spewing silver-like threads from its mouth. After a while, the fire died down, the creature vanished, and in its place a gleaming silver thread remained. Spruce hid the thread and once again requested her husband's permission to leave. This time the grass snake set another challenge. He pulled out iron shoes from beneath the throne and said, "You cannot leave until these shoes are completely worn out." Spruce put on the shoes and tried to break them by stomping on rocks, but they were so strong that nothing happened. The harder she tried, the more helpless she felt. So she once again visited the old witch, who told her, "Take these shoes to a blacksmith and ask him to heat them in the fire until they glow white." Spruce did exactly that. When the shoes had been burned in the embers until they softened, they wore out within 3 days. Once again she asked her husband for permission to leave. This time the grass snake agreed, but with one last condition: "It wouldn't be proper for you to leave empty-handed. First, bake a pie for the guests and take it with you." However, he had cunningly hidden all the kitchen utensils in the palace, so that Spruce had nothing to knead the dough in. She wondered for a long time how she could fetch water and knead the dough without a bowl, but when no solution came to mind, she visited the old woman once again. The old woman advised, "Do not try to fetch water from the well. Instead, take a sieve, seal its holes with yeast, and use it to draw water from the river. Then, knead the dough in it and bake the pie." Spruce did as she was told. She prepared the pie, and at last she was ready to depart. As she was about to leave, the grass snake escorted her to the shore. Bidding her farewell, he said, "Stay with your parents for 9 days, but return on the 10th day. When you come back, come alone and stand by the shore, calling out to me like this: 'If you are alive, my husband, the sea foam will be as white as milk. If you have died, my love, the foam will be red as blood. If the sea boils and the foam turns milky white, know that I am alive. But if the foam is red like blood, know that I am dead.'" Saying this, the grass snake bid Spruce farewell, and she set off for her parents' home. When Spruce arrived at her parents' home, there was no limit to their joy. Her parents and siblings were astonished at how she looked, how she had been living, and whether she was happy with the grass snake. Spruce was so busy answering their questions that she hardly had a moment to herself. She spoke of her grand life, the blue palace beneath the sea, the enchanting feasts, and the kindness of her husband, and everyone listened to her tales with great interest. Meanwhile, her 12 brothers devised a plan. They decided to take the help of their sisters to ensure that this time Spruce would not return to the grass snake. Her sisters cleverly tricked her into revealing the secret. When she called out certain words at the seashore, the grass snake would come to fetch her. Armed with sharp sickles, her 12 brothers rushed to the shore. There they repeated the exact words they had learned from Spruce. Hearing this call, the grass snake swam up from the depths of the sea and approached the shore. But as soon as he emerged, Spruce's brothers attacked him with their sickles, killing him. They then returned home in silence without saying a word to Spruce. 9 days passed. The day arrived when Spruce was supposed to return to her husband. She happily bid farewell to her parents and siblings and made her way to the shore. Facing the sea, she called out the same words. "If you are alive, my husband, the sea foam will be as white as milk. If you have perished, my love, the foam will be red as blood." As soon as her voice echoed through the air, the color of the sea began to change. The waves grew restless, the water turned dark, and instead of foaming white like milk, the foam rose up red as blood. Spruce's heart sank. Suddenly, her husband's voice rang out. "Spruce, it was your 12 brothers who struck me down with their sickles. You have broken your promise, and now you will stand here still forever, like a tree that can never move." And as those words were spoken, Spruce's feet began to take root in the ground. Her body hardened into solid wood, her arms stretched out into branches, and her hair transformed into leaves. She had turned into a spruce tree, standing still and unmoving, as if time itself had imprisoned her. It is said that even today that tree still stands there.